We begin, though, with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre calling for the resignation of Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino over the transfer of convicted serial killer Paul Bernardo to a medium security prison. This after CBC News learned staffers in Mendicino's office knew about the transfer for months, but didn't tell the minister until after it happened.
Minister Mendicino's office says staff knew, he did not know. You don't believe that?
Why has the staff not been fired?
What do you think should happen now?
Marco Mendicino needs to resign.
And what if he doesn't?
The Prime Minister needs to fire him.
Minister Mendicino rejected Poilievre's calls to step aside, saying he's already taken action.
I have taken corrective steps internally with my office, an office for which I am responsible for, to this Parliament, to the Canadian public, which is why immediately upon knowing that fact that he was transferred to a medium security institution, I raised it with the Commissioner. I've spoken with the representatives of the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French.
Tim Danson is the lawyer representing the families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey, two of Paul Bernardo's victims. Mr. Danson, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You spoke with Marco Mendicino earlier today, is what the Public Safety Minister said today in question period. What can you tell us about that conversation in terms of what clarity the minister may have given you?
It was a relatively short conversation, but the minister wanted me to communicate to the French and Mahaffey families that he, as he has said publicly, that he was shocked by the decision and that it was incomprehensible to him, and that he wasn't going to let it slide by, and he was kind of looking into it, and we'd be advised as the process unfolded. I certainly made the point that that I felt that the only thing that can be done now is that the decision be rescinded and that Paul Bernardo be returned to Millhaven, and that I felt that he had the jurisdiction to do so. There were no commitments made on the call, but he did want to make sure that I had communicated to the families that his thoughts were with them, and he understands the anguish that they're going through at this point in time.
Did he give you any explanation as to the reports that my colleague Ashley Burke did, that his office knew about Bernardo's transfer for 3 months before they finally told the minister? Did he give you any insight into that?
No, that wasn't discussed on the call. I was certainly more focused on having the decision rescinded and expressing my view that he had the authority to do it. That other issue is certainly concerning to me, but it wasn't something that was discussed on this morning's phone call.
Well, what authority do you think he has to rescind the decision of an individual prisoner? Because a lot of the legal commentary I've seen suggests it has to apply broadly to an entire class of prisoner. How do you think he can make it so that Paul Bernardo goes back to maximum security?
Well, first of all, I don't accept the explanation about prisoners at large. I think that's part of the problem. Paul Bernardo is clearly the most notorious, dangerous, sadistic, sexual pedophile. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of the experts. Those are the words of the trial judge, then Associate Chief Justice Lesage. So Paul Bernardo is in a very, very different category. I think that one of the real problems that we're having with this is that there's a complete absence of transparency. So when I got the word after the fact, and let's be clear about that, by the time I was able to speak with representatives of Corrections Canada, Paul Bernardo had already been transferred. When they talk about prior notice, that's just nonsense. They did leave a voicemail earlier in the day. I wasn't available in the morning, simply said that it's Corrections Canada and we have some information for you. Not even reference to Paul Bernardo. I mean, I represent a lot of victims, and there's a lot of people who are in the correction system. So it could have been any number of my clients. So there was certainly nothing there. But once I was given notice, I asked the questions that are being asked right now. Why? What is the criteria? What was the basis for this? I mean, if they're confident in their decision, then they should provide it to the public so the public can be informed and make their own decisions as to whether it's appropriate or not. But when you resort to complete secrecy, that creates a real problem. So, they keep talking about privacy legislation. Well, the Privacy Act has to be read in tandem with the Access to Information Act, And the Privacy Act itself requires the government to undertake a principled and proportional weighing of the public interest against the privacy interests of the person in question, which in this case happens to be Paul Bernardo. It's not an analysis at large. So I've been trying to find out what privacy rights are they talking about in the circumstances of this case relating to Paul Bernardo that is of such magnitude that it trumps the public interest and the public's right to know, and there's no answer for that. And we need an answer for that. And I have my own hunches what it is, but why are we working on the basis of hunches and speculation when the public has a right to know?
Well, there's been some reporting suggesting he's being moved to this particular facility in Quebec because it's a place where they house, like, say, sex offenders and people who might be at risk in a more general population setting like he was in Millhaven. I mean, is that your hunch? Does that jive with what you've heard in your inquiries into this?
Well, I mean, just through media reports, I mean, I'm aware that that's potentially an argument. Others is that that they're committed to rehabilitation, and another is my suspicion, which I have witnessed over 43 years of practice in this area, that there is an agenda where they move serious offenders from maximum security to medium to minimum. And then improve their chances for parole before the parole board. I don't know if that's the case here or not, but it certainly, in the absence of any explanation, is one that is, there's a red flag on that. But the other thing is about this whole notion of rehabilitation. I mean, let's understand something. There is no cure. There is no treatment, serious treatment for sadistic sexual psychopaths. There is none. And we just need to go back 2 years ago to Bernardo's 2021 parole hearing, where the parole board themselves said, based on expert evidence, and this is in my letter that was made public to that I wrote to the commissioner last week, where I'm quoting from the parole board itself. This man, as of 2 years ago, still had no empathy, no remorse, no insight, and that he wasn't treatable. And now here we are 2 years later, and they're transferring him to medium security. This is really, disturbing for us, and it completely ignores the punishment side of his sentence. We don't have capital punishment in this country, which is fine by me. But with offenders, he's the worst. He's the worst of the worst. If life doesn't mean life, then what does it mean for Canada's worst offenders? The punishment is part of this sentence. It is the principal criteria under sentencing guidelines. It's consistent with the Supreme Court of Canada's decision in Bissonnette as to the priority of punishment and deterrence. And he should be spending the rest of his life in a maximum security penitentiary as part of his punishment.
I wonder, sir, on the political controversy that's played out, because I think there's broad disagreement in Ottawa that you are on the right side of public sentiment there on what should happen with Paul Bernardo. But on the political controversy that's playing out here now about the minister's office knowing about this for 3 months before they decided to tell Marco Mendicino, the public safety minister, the Conservatives are calling for him to resign over this. Do you think it needs to go to that point, or do you think the minister's explanation holds water?
Well, I'm very consciously, I don't want to weigh in on the political issues, so I don't want to comment one way or the other on that. And I think there's too many questions unanswered. So not that I want to duck your question, but I just really, want to stick to what's important to my clients, which is getting this order rescinded and having them transferred back. And I'll let the political people do what they do. But but I will say this in terms of the controversy of notice. The questions that I have is, given who we're talking about, Canada's most notorious dangerous offender, how is it possible that the commissioner or the deputy commissioner doesn't pick up the telephone and speak to the deputy minister and or the minister himself or both on something of such significance for this particular ministry? And if they're not picking up the phone to tell them directly, why are they not sending emails to the deputy minister and the minister rather than kind of generically to their office? And then how is it possible that now we know that this has been, known since March 2nd. How is it possible that so much time could go by and a minister not be advised as is being claimed?
Yeah.
I mean, is this plausible deniability, kind of bureaucratic, systemic, plausible deniability bordering on willful blindness? I don't know. It's deeply troubling, and this is what happens when you have a system of secrecy instead of transparency. But our hope is that the decision will be rescinded.
You've mentioned your clients a couple of times, the families for Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey, and I don't want to lose sight of that. These are the people who should be at the center of this in a big way. And just as a final point, how are they doing in all of this, having all of this dragged back in and then thrust back into the middle of this sort of an issue?
Well, they're in a state of shock and disbelief, and they feel like they've been marginalized. But Debbie Mahaffey, in particular, the Mahaffey family, I mean, this is really disturbing because now we know that they've known this since March. Why would they wait till now to release this decision and have this discussion? Tonight, this day, is when Paul Bernardo abducted Leslie Mahaffey, and she's murdered on Father's Day. So, where is the sensitivity towards victims? If they could have done this, we would have still been upset with the decision. But they didn't have to wait for this period of time in the Mahaffey's life to have this controversy right now. So it's particularly devastating for her, and it's difficult for the families. They don't understand it, and when they understand that even basic questions that they have asked, which we've asked through me, and what the media is asking, the public is asking, silence because of Paul Bernardo's privacy rights. He certainly didn't give a damn about the privacy rights of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. Let's not that anyone's trying to sanitize what he did, but for those of us who know exactly what he did, who unfortunately had to view the videotapes and see what this man did to these girls and see that he's getting this kind of treatment, I'm sorry, there has to be some connection between his acts and the way he is treated in prison.
Tim Danson, I want to thank you for speaking with me today, and please come back if there are any developments. Thank you so much, sir.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, just a quick clarification. I misspoke during that interview. Obviously, there's not broad disagreement with Tim Danson's position on what should happen with Paul Bernardo. There's broad agreement with his position on what should happen with Paul Bernardo. My mistake. I regret that. I just wanted to clear that up.